Hello folks, Simon here, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking to you about Final Fantasy IX Remake. No, sadly the game still hasn't received an official announcement, however it is about as close to certain now as any game can be without any kind of official confirmation. By this point I am 99% sure that this game is happening, so let's talk about why that is, and also let's discuss what the actual phrase remake means in the Final Fantasy IX context, because I don't think it's what many will be expecting. As we get started, I want to give a big shout out and thank you to everybody who has been supporting the channel as a YouTube member or patron, and if you're new around here, please do subscribe for future FF9 updates. Okay, a little bit of context. Some of you will probably remember this article that was posted last year on the official PlayStation blog. It was authored by Kazuhiko Aoki. He was one of the original designers for Final Fantasy IX back in the day. And in this article, he shared some of his experiences in working on the game back during its development. Now, there was no mention of remakes or anything like that here. And back when this was first posted, I talked a little bit about it on the channel. Again, I'm not trying to say I predicted anything, I didn't. But I did at the time mention how interesting I found it that Square were posting articles on Final Fantasy IX, clearly with the intention of getting the game back into our minds. Fair enough, at the time the game was also releasing on PlayStation Now, and clearly the article was going to be serving as part of the marketing for that, no question. However, even at the time I mentioned that I felt like there's something more to this, as this is quite a, an in-depth article to be sharing just for a re-release of the original game on PlayStation Now streaming. And I didn't say that, we're going to be getting a remake or anything like that, but I did suggest that perhaps Square are working on something Final Fantasy IX related behind the scenes that they haven't yet announced. But of course the question was, if Square are indeed working on a Final Fantasy IX mystery project, then what could it be? Well, roll in the Nvidia GeForce Now leak, which at the time was seen as somewhat suspect for various reasons. But over time, over the last few months, it has pretty much been playing out to the T, and it has a lot of credibility now. So the GeForce Now leak, which was put out in September of last year, effectively is where the server, I'm not very technical, so you'll have to excuse me, but the servers where the upcoming games that were going to be released on GeForce Now on PC were listed was found or hacked or whatever you want to call it by a user. And all of the games that were listed on that server have been made public. Now, we've got this nice Reddit article here, credit to Last Grail for this one, where all of these games have been listed. And if we go down to the Square Enix section, we can see the games that were listed on the GeForce Now leak. So, Chrono Cross Remaster, we know that that's just come out. Final Fantasy VII Remake, we know that that's come out on PC. Final Fantasy XVI has also been announced to be coming to PC after an exclusivity window on PlayStation, etc, etc. Now, recently, this is where the exciting thing is, Kingdom Hearts 4 has been announced by Square. This is one of those games that was really a roadblock in really believing these leaks were accurate, because nobody was expecting Kingdom Hearts 4. And if this was a made-up leak, it seemed like a silly thing to include, but it was on the list, and it has now been announced. This effectively makes the GeForce Now leak pretty much all but certain. And guess what? One of the only titles left on Square Enix that hasn't yet come to fruition is the Final Fantasy IX Remake. I truly believe that by this point there really is very little doubt that Final Fantasy IX is in development, or at the very least has been in development. If this game is never announced, even then, I do not believe that it was never being worked on, but for whatever reason, it just never came through full circle. But I'm not saying that is the case. I'm just saying if for whatever reason it never did get an announcement. But I truly believe that this game will be revealed this year. But I do just want to briefly go over what a potential FF9R could look like, especially in light of the fact that we live in a world where Final Fantasy VII Remake is already a thing. I understand a lot of doubts are out there about the announcement of FF9 Remake because Why would Square do such a thing when Final Fantasy VII Remake is still in full active development? We are currently awaiting for Part 2, and there's no end in sight for that project. Well, I feel this is where we need to put our biases and our assumptions on the table, because we assume the word remake is going to have a consistent meaning between different projects. And I understand that, okay? When you have Final Fantasy and remake together, you are automatically going to think of FF7 Remake, but it doesn't mean that every project has to be like that. In fact, remake could mean a lot of different things. But I do want to point you to this post, which I've spoken about before, by an artist called Fabian Denter, who shared his idea for a Final Fantasy IX Remake back in 2019. Now, as you can see, this project looks remarkably like the original game. However, it would absolutely, if this ever came to fruition as a proper game, be a remake because everything has been remade from the ground up. Now, just to clarify, this is not a game, this is not a mod, it is just a concept that was put out by Fabian Denter back in the day that was extremely well received by the Final Fantasy IX community. I mean, as you can see, it looks absolutely gorgeous, but it is a very different style of remake to Final Fantasy VII's remake. Okay, this is far closer to the original game. And as a side note, this Final Fantasy IX Remake concept by Mr. Denter was uploaded onto the internet almost 3 years ago now, back in 2019. And sadly, there has been no further updates on this project since. However, that in and of itself has fueled further speculation that maybe Square sort of recognised this work and actually hired the guy. Well, I'm not for one moment suggesting that that has happened. However, I wouldn't be surprised if Square, you know, seeing some of the amazing work that fans of their older games can put out, do actually approach these people and offer them paid positions to come and continue with their projects in some official capacity. Once again, I'm not for one moment suggesting that Mr. Denter is working on this project now officially for Square, but it is kind of interesting that this concept was put out there. It was very well received, and now we have an almost certain upcoming announcement for a Final Fantasy IX Remake. You know, at the very least, I wouldn't be surprised if Square saw this, they saw the positive reaction to it and thought, hey, we could actually do something like this ourselves and people would love it. But that is really just some food for thought for you guys. You know, a few weeks ago, I wasn't really that convinced about a Final Fantasy IX Remake after the announcement of Kingdom Hearts 4. Like I say, I am fairly certain that this is a project that is happening. And even though we know nothing about it, really, I wouldn't be surprised if it is a very different kind of project to Final Fantasy VII Remake. To be honest, I do not even suspect it will have the phrase remake in its title. Even though technically that is what it would be, I feel that Square, from a marketing point of view, would want to differentiate it from the kind of project we are getting with Final Fantasy VII. In terms of release windows, the Nvidia GeForce Now leak had the game listed for a 2022 release, so if that is still on, I would expect an announcement at some point in the coming weeks or months. But of course, you know, releases change all the time, so if we don't hear anything for a while, don't discount this as not happening. It could just be the case that Square are wanting to put a bit more time and effort into it to give us a better game. But as always, folks, I am very interested in hearing your thoughts about this. This is one project I could definitely be excited for. How about you guys? Would you want to see a Final Fantasy IX Remake? Now, I know a lot of you would probably choose other Final Fantasy games to get that treatment first, but the good thing is, if this is a different kind of project to FF7R, and if it is successful, I cannot see why we can't see the same treatment then for some of the other Final Fantasy games, and other games in Square's library as well, from their older titles going forward. As always, for future updates, please stay subscribed to the channel, and I'll catch you next time.